And we are live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Today, joined by Josh, and looks like Tom McCluskey, you are on the nice list this year. Is that what I'm saying?
It goes back and forth.
Oh! Wow, for the audio listeners, that was just quite the visual effect. He's got a sequined, ugly Christmas sweater that goes from naughty to nice, depending on, how he's been behaving.
Apparently his behavior, yeah.
Erica told me it was Ugly Sweater Day. I apparently owe her a little
No,
conversation.
come on. In all fairness, McCluskey, every sweater you wear is an ugly sweater.
Okay.
Well, it's not, and in fairness, it's not the sweater.
You.
Well, the boys are rocking today, and who better to have on the show when, according to what I'm seeing, we could be looking at a government shutdown here. So, Tom, is that why you have extra time, that the government's going to shut down? You have no one to go bug on the Hill?
Well, when the government shuts down, that's how it is. It's been a little busier than normal. And I've just got to say, I had resigned. I wrote a memo, I think, for Catholic Vote back in October about lame duck things you got to watch out for. And I had no plan. Lame ducks are always bad. It's impossible to stop anything. I was talking to some people yesterday morning and just said, this is just going to happen. It's got bad stuff in it. Though this Elon Musk tweet is interesting, I wonder if that'll change things. And lo and behold, I was just shocked that what was a real
Elon blew it up.
bill fell. It was beautiful.
Many people are dismayed, actually, to see that billionaires are having an influence on Congress. It's been a real outrage.
They got outraged in the last 10 minutes, not with George Soros and all the other left-wing billionaires.
Josh, what do you? No. But billionaires' influence are now, a main concern for Democrats these days. Strangely, so I think because people have been at different points of this process. Let's go back to the beginning, as you were saying, Tom. Just a basic summary on what goes on this time of year in order to fund the government.
Well, what goes on this time of year is supposed to happen back in April to like June, where they pass appropriation bills to fund the budget or to fund the country, the government. And always they fail. So then they do some sort of continuing resolution until February or until like August or September. And then they always say, okay, let's do it right before Christmas.
Well, just real quick to butt up. It's like the normal year for the government ends on September 30th. That's when the government, when they fund the government, the fiscal year is until September 30th. And so your point is these guys on the Hill are supposed to be passing, fighting, negotiating all these funding bills. There's like 13 or whatever during the course of the spring and the summer in order to pass all these budgets by September 30, but they never get to it.
Right. And they always push it to right before Christmas when what's called the fumes caucus, because the airplane fumes, all the members who want to leave right before Christmas. And normally they get away with passing the garbage that we saw from that first bill. And you talk about billionaires influencing, here billionaires influenced in a good way. I've learned like the people who wrote that bill were like K Street healthcare lobbyists, like Pharma, which is a multi-billion-dollar organization, into the trans stuff and everything else. They wrote most of the bill, the healthcare stuff. So it was a clear victory yesterday.
So again, it went from a 1,500-page bill that got dropped on people's desks. They wanted to vote on it within, I think, 48 hours. And what happened to it was Elon Musk tweets out, this is what's going on. There's transparency now. We see that this should just be we want a clean continuing resolution, which meant just keep funding at the levels it is now and don't tack on additional, I think it was like $100 billion. They said, of course, some of it was aid to make people feel bad if they don't pass it. But then, of course, there's tons of write-ins for ridiculous requests from people losing power, essentially the Democrats. And so the answer was, no, we're not going to pass this bill. We're going to go for a clean one. That was step number one, correct?
Right. And that's what Mike Johnson had promised, just a clean CR.
I got to help you, our audience, to help people understand things. So House Speaker Mike Johnson then after Elon blew everything up, he was then open to this idea of doing what's known as a clean CR, which is just a continuing resolution, keep the government funding for a short window of time at the same rate it had done during the previous year, right? And that was the thought was to do that for 2 months or something like that.
And what killed that was what President Trump wanted was the increase of the debt limit, which I was against increasing the debt limit through this means, except if I was advising President Trump, that's exactly what I tell him. Increase the debt limit now so you don't have to deal with it later. But it does take, I think, a negotiating tool when you increase the debt limit for Doge or reconciliation. It does take it off the table when you can't threaten with the debt limit, as we have
Well,
in
I
the
think part of
past.
the problem is that there's a lot of conservative activists across the country who think our government spends way too much money. We need to cut way too much funding, which I do agree, actually, by the way. But they think that Donald Trump also believes in that, and I think the record really doesn't show that. I think Donald Trump is more than happy to run deficits, more than happy to run expensive, spending bills. He voices a little bit, oh, this is terrible, but does he really believe it? Would Donald Trump actually shut down the government to cut spending? Because, he and House Speaker Mike Johnson came together and said, yeah, let's do this, raise the debt limit for 2 years. Let's do this kind of relatively clean CR with some, emergency funding and some other things that were not too crazy, like Farm Bill or whatever, not horrible, and then just pass it. And I was like, okay, it's not great, but I would have been fine with it. But there's about 30 Republicans no, we're not going to go for it. And now we're at this impasse where there's not 218 votes to keep the government running right now, and we may end up having this thing shut down in the next 24 hours.
So here's a fun picture. Here's the difference between this first bill that they're about to ram through. And for all the people complaining, I'd like to make an additional point. And Tom, you understand this well. They could have passed this first smaller bill that was clean, which was eventually was put forward. But first they tried to add in these 1,500 pages. If you wanted to pass emergency relief, say to North Carolina, you could come together as Congress and do that completely separate from a continuing resolution. You could just bring it forward, say, hey, we need this additional funds. Let's just separate this and we can all vote on it. But they didn't do that. They added it to this larger bill. They added it on top of this, which just could have been brought forth and voted on because they were trying to ram through extra pork in this bill. So you get to this one, and then basically people came forward and said, hey, we're not even going to pass this one. And so that's my question to you. This seems like a clean bill. And as Josh is saying, we're at an impasse now because for some reason, people did not want to pass the second one. Why didn't they pass the clean second one?
For a number of those Republicans, I mean, there are some that I can't. I would go insane if I try to delve into the mind of Nancy Mace. But for somebody like Chip Roy, it's the debt limit is very serious to them. They right now there is no debt limit because Biden working with Congress eliminated the debt limit until early next year.
Well, they just changed the debt limit from a finite amount that it can't exceed to being that there is no debt limit until a certain date, which Trump wanted to continue for another 2 years. Right.
And so where they're stuck at right now is I don't blame Chip Roy for wanting to vote against it. It probably and Johnson should have known that there's a number who take the debt limit seriously. The debt limit negotiations in the past have actually fiscal conservatives have used it to reduce the deficit and reduce spending. The Budget Control Act was passed because of debt limit negotiations. That was I think that might have been under Obama.
That was with Boehner,
so it has
right?
been, yeah. So it has been used positively in the past. I think
it would be really neat. What about this, McCluskey? I mean, I would say come back with a CR, not with the 2-year debt ceiling limit, but I kind of feel like if Trump said, okay, maybe I can't get 2 years, but let's at least have the debt limit increased for the sake of the whatever this is, a 2-month CR. What is it? A 3-month? Have it
3.
Yeah. Say, okay, well, at least give us 6 months. So we're not running out of potential where the government shuts down plus you have hitting the debt limit, like a double whammy. But I do feel like Congress should just start having the debt limit and the appropriations kind of together. It's like, if you're going to spend the money, you need to be able to give yourself I don't think we should spend this much money, but if you're going to spend the darn money, you should at least authorize the ability to borrow the money. It's like a twofer. Why segregate these out? I mean, I understand it operates as a tool, but like, I think too often conservatives have this mind. Conservatives who really want to cut spending a lot need to realize that it's not as popular as they may think, because once their Americans' favorite program gets cut, then they start screaming. I mean, this is what happened in 1995. Newt Gingrich tried to cut spending, and everyone freaked out, and it went nowhere. I mean, maybe things have changed in 30 years, but
I would die, because if you really want to cut spending, you do have to address some of the mandatory spending. That's Medicare, that's Medicaid, that's Social Security, and that is not popular to get rid of. And when you have over, I think, 50% of the country on some sort of welfare type thing, welfare type program, people want to cut the government. They just don't want to cut their part of the government.
So even putting this debt aside, so we're looking at a shutdown here. And from my understanding, this isn't actually that unusual. What does shutting down the government during this period of time look like? What does that actually mean?
It's Andy Harris, congressman from Maryland, fantastic guy, Catholic, new chair of the Freedom Caucus. In his first meeting, or his first interview right after, he said it's the perfect time to shut down the government, because January 3rd, Republicans take over. January 1st falls on a Wednesday. So most federal employees are taking Thursday and Friday as vacation days. So most federal employees are going to be on vacation over these next 2 weeks to begin with anyway. So why not shut it down? And it gives you a fresh slate when you come back. And nobody's going to most Republicans are afraid to shut down the government because they think it hurts them during elections. I don't fully agree with that, but I can't convince all those Republicans they're wrong.
Well,
but you're so far away.
In terms of the electoral impact, I mean, there was the time where they shut the government down, and then the Virginia elections, which are in odd years, happened, and so they did have that detrimental effect. And that, unfortunately, the wrong lesson was learned from that. Republicans got really scared from it. But there are other times where Ted Cruz, I think, was kind of a little quixotic by shutting the government down over this, because like, I don't know if that's going to work. But it didn't really cause any ill effects. I mean, I'm sorry, but the 2026 midterm elections are not going to hinge on if this government was shut down for 2 or 3 weeks. It's not going to be that detrimental to Republicans just to shut it down. But I do want to bring up a point, like there's a woman named Cheryl Atkinson, and she was a TV reporter with CBS News, and now she kind of saw the light within the last few years, and she's now a conservative, and she's been working with different outfits. Like she was at Daily Signal for a while, I think. I can't remember if I'm getting that right. Anyway, she shared a little something on social media, and I thought it was pretty interesting. She said, "Quick story about government shutdowns and the theatrics behind them. One year when I was reporting at CBS News during a government shutdown, I think 2013, we were sincerely searching for real life impact. When we couldn't find any, that should have been part of the story. Instead, we kept trying to create the appearance of an impact. It wasn't really trying to be dishonest," she says. It was, in my retrospective view, because the general editorial idea for the story was to show how bad the Republican shutdown was for ordinary Americans. And the answer couldn't be that it wasn't. I've written quite a bit about this, but as journalists too often, she says, they decide the story in advance, and they shape the facts to fit our narrative rather than gathering information and letting that tell the story, whatever that might be. Anyway, she said, the Democrats were blaming Republicans for the shutdown, so we were calling Democrats and the Obama administration for ideas to report what was having a real impact on the shutdown. Taking our cue, these officials fabricated impact that we could report. For example, they cordoned off outdoor public monuments in Washington, D.C. We knew and even discussed in the newsroom that this made no sense. after all, these monuments weren't manned to begin with. Like the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Memorial, they cut them off. You couldn't even get into it. It was crazy. So she said this, the only reason to cordon them off, she said, from the public was so that visiting tourists would see the, quote, impact of the shutdowns. And then the news media would have something, to take pictures of and to interview people who are upset. It was all theater.
And that actually hurt the Obama administration because because you have honor flights coming in, World War II veterans. The World War II Veteran Memorial had just recently opened, and there's things called honor flights where World War II veterans who were losing so many, we've lost majority of them. They come in and they're allowed a special tour of the monument, a special tour of the Lincoln Memorial, and
coolest thing when they do
members
that.
of Congress would fight with the guards, and the guards finally were like, yeah, we're not going to fight members of Congress and people in wheelchairs and not allow them into this open air monument.
Well, I know I see Tony in the chats talking about it shuts down non-essential government workers. So the essential ones are still, quote unquote, essential ones are working still. And it actually furloughs the non-essential employees, so they wouldn't be able to take leave theoretically. I think we've kind of covered this all pretty well. I like to get an insider perspective on this because this is extremely just me kind of observing everything from Twitter, public sentiment. Obviously, Elon Musk played a big role. I personally am really frustrated with Mike Johnson. Like, I think that he could have handled this so much better. And it frustrates me seeing what seems to be Democrats who just lost, who shouldn't really have any real power, felt like they can just ram business as usual. We're going to ram in a bunch of ridiculous, government censorship stuff, COVID era restrictions back into this continuing resolution. They're using it as an opportunity for a win, when it feels to me they shouldn't be able to win anything right now. The American people have spoken, and you shouldn't be able to win. And Mike Johnson just kind of was like, okay, we're going to do business as usual. We operate in secret. We don't really have public transparency, and we're going to seemingly screw over the American people. And I don't care if it's bipartisan and people working together. I'm frustrated. So I see this as Elon Musk bringing in transparency to the process, showing Americans how outrageous it is. And then there's like Republicans like Dan Crenshaw or whoever mad at the American people or mad at random anon accounts on Twitter, snapping off, biting at them. We are the people that put you in. It feels like, if anything, Elon Musk is representing me, my thoughts for the first time. And rather, my elected representatives are not representing me. So I guess, Tom, what do you see this as? Do you see this as the same failure? Do you see this as a productive, good addition to the process now that we get some transparency and that we can actually, it feels like, represent the people's will?
That the bill failed was a victory for the last 3.5, 4 years. I've heard from Senate and House leadership, we can't pass anything because we don't have the White House. Honestly, for the last 2 weeks, I've heard from those exact same people, we need to pass this so we have a clean slate. Before we couldn't pass anything. Now we need to pass this garbage, which would help fund a lot of things that we're trying to defund. And as I was reading up about a shutdown, and I normally would advocate for a shutdown. I don't care. But if there is a shutdown, that means all this money that the Biden administration is pouring out to all its allies right now would stop. They can't do any more spending like that, even if they have it. So they can't allocate any more money to their friends. They'll certainly still try.
But we're running into a situation where, House Speaker Mike Johnson's got a majority of his conference, but not all of it, because he's lost 30 votes. But the problem is the margins are so tight. I mean, there's like a 7-seat majority or 5-seat majority for the Republicans. I forget. It's not that big. So my point is, Johnson's like, okay, he has two options. My preferred option was you go back to the 35 no's and see if, what can I do to get you to get to be a yes? Can I give up on the 2-year debt ceiling increase, bring it to maybe 9 months? Would that get you back on board? Something to get some of those more in. But the other option is he goes back to the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and seeing if he can, what can I give you? And then we end up with a bill that gets, a majority of Democrats and like half the Republicans, and we lose out. So that's my worry. Again, I might agree in principle with most of what the 35 Republicans who voted no with. I might agree more with them in principle, but my concern is now they're going to want to. Washington is going to want to make sure the government gets funded, and so my point is, I kind of give up on this very limited government kind of thing. But like, what is the best deal I can get that can get 218 yeses and 60 yeses in the Senate? And I have a feeling they're going to go the way where they say, oh, well, fine. You 30 Republicans are too crazy. We'll get 100 Democrats to vote for this. It'll spend a lot more money than the second bill, which I think is not horrible. The first bill was terrible. The second bill was not great, but this third bill I think is going to be worse now because they're going to get Democrats to do it, and then they're going to throw it over to the Senate, and they'll get 70 votes, and then we have to fight like hell next year.
What I hear, what they're doing right now is it's possible a 1 month CR going into January, which probably would work. It sets some timetables back on other things they want to do, like reconciliation and things like that.
A 1 month CR, like literally as Donald Trump is being sworn in, like the budget expires. Like, think about that. Like, that's. I mean, you step on everything he wants to do. Like, literally, all the day one activity he wants to do, and now he's being like that. And actually, the point. What about this? Why not just say, "Okay, pass your stupid bill," and then Trump can just, if he really believes in cutting government and he really believes in this Doge stuff, start exercising impoundment and just say, "We're not. You appropriate it, but I'm not going to spend it."
I think if they got rid of probably the debt limit increase, they'd get enough Republicans and Democrats, because Democrats, they want the blind debt limit increase as well. They don't like that it's under Trump, but they want that as well. They want the disaster relief. They want to get out of town. Yesterday was political theater that they all voted against that bill because they knew it would embarrass Mike Johnson. So I think if they went back without the debt limit increase, they get enough Republicans and enough Democrats to reach 218.
So, McCluskey, what do you think about this? What if they had what if they passed a law that said once the government shuts down, it would automatically kick in like 60 days of government funding, and it would just be like at 80% of what the previous year was, so that at least there's things, the FBI still gets funding, all these different agencies still get funding, but it's just lower. So like some sort of mechanism, maybe not 80%, maybe it's like 90% or something like that. So, because like it is, I hate this. I mean, someone said in the chat, I hate how dysfunctional government is. I do. I hate it. I wish that, we could actually get reform. I hate that we have these fights, 4 or 5 days before Christmas. It's terrible. That's how Obamacare got, that vote. I mean, I'd love to have some structural changes, like, wouldn't it be nice? What if we had a constitutional amendment that just said any legislation passed during a lame duck after an election and before the new session of Congress would require a 2/3 vote? Wouldn't that be great? Like certain stuff like that. Like, okay, you can still have a lame duck Congress. You don't have to wait until January to pass legislation if you really need it. But if you really need it, you should be able to get 2/3.
Well, if you remember, the president, well, you wouldn't remember personally, but the president used to not get sworn in until March or April.
That's right.
Lame ducks used to be months and months long, and they changed it because
you'd have to assemble a government, right?
Right.
Well, that's also because they assumed that the Electoral College is when the actual election would happen, because that was just happened this week. It was December 16 or 17 or whatever. We already knew who the president was. We've known that every election since 2000. We've known it right away. And so they're able to start assembling the government much faster. And that's why it was FDR that was able to get it moved.
So, boys, in the interest of time, I'm just going to get you down on predictions. Tom and Josh, will the government shut down? Yes or no?
I mean, I'll say it first. I mean, I think it will functionally shut down, maybe for a few hours, but I think the fumes are still so big. I mean, they could even do a thing where they literally pass a 3-hour budget, and as they're waiting for legislation to come together. I think there's going to be an agreement today. Ultimately, there's going to be agreement whether the government shuts down for 1 hour or 5 hours. I think they will have an agreement. I will say that they will basically have an agreement, and and they will keep it all going. So
no or yes?
I don't think it's going to shut down. I mean, if it does, it'll be for just a few hours. Not
All right.
really.
All right.
Essentially, no. I don't think it will shut down.
Essentially, no. Tom, what do you got?
I think Josh is right. It'll. I don't know what they'll come up with. They could even do something until the 27th. Just come back after Christmas. But if it shuts down, it'll be for a couple of hours when people are sleeping. So,
okay. I appreciate the input.
You know what? By the way, I know in the interest of time, but I just want to throw this out like a 1 minute idea. Someone posted this yesterday, and I thought it was pretty sensible. It's one of those things where you say it, and people who are conservative or who want limited government think you're insane for saying it. But it would be kind of interesting if actually we paid senators a salary of like $1 million. And if we paid congressmen, like, in the House, like $700,000 a year, because they make like only about $200,000 an hour or whatever. And like Hill staffers, if it would be socially acceptable to actually pay these people like twice what they paid now. And people think, are you out of your mind? Why would you give these people more money? Well, the fact of the matter is, if you go to work in Capitol Hill, you get interested in government, you move to DC when you're like, young and 24 or whatever. That's what I did. And I didn't get a job on the Hill, but I know a lot of people who did. And you get paid such peanuts, and it's very expensive to live in that town. And you do it for a couple of years. You build up your Rolodex, you build up your contacts, and then you cash out and you get a job as a lobbyist or doing something else where you get paid a lot of money, and all the people still working on the Hill. You can't make money long-term working inside Congress. Right. And so we don't have people in there that have a lot of experience because they can't afford to do it for too much longer. And then the congressmen and senators, like, honestly, I know it's not like, why would you give them $1 million? Like, I want to attract the best and brightest, and I want people who, I know it sounds crazy, but like, what do they need all that money for? If they're the senator from, Oklahoma, you need a house in Oklahoma and you need one in Washington, D.C. And it's not easy. Like, honestly, the reason why and this sounds so crazy, people think I'm nuts, but one of the reasons that some of these congressmen, when they first get elected, they actually sleep in their House office, like Sean Duffy, because it's hard. Like, and any congressman who complains about it, which he kind of like offhanded said something, back in 2011, people thought, oh, poor guy got elected to Congress. And so no one sympathizes with you, but it actually is kind of one of the reasons why we have bad government. We should also expand the size of the House. People think I'm nuts on that, but we actually need to reform this institution.
Josh's 1 minute idea, take it or leave it. Okay, next section, I have weird Christmas traditions, okay? So this is time for chat engagement. I want to know, do you have a strange Christmas tradition? I'm kind of in the point of building my family where I've kind of left my own family. They have their traditions. And then I'm starting to like build up my own at this point. So now I'm thinking of, okay, what do I grab? What do I get rid of? What do I kind of keep going? The first question, I guess, is controversial. Do you open gifts on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?
I think we do a little bit of both in my family. I mean, at least I remember growing up, we did, the gifts to each other, and then the gifts from Santa Claus was quote unquote the next day on Christmas Day. I think what we do at our house now is that we have one gift that we open up Christmas Eve, and then the rest are Christmas Day. I think that's what it is. But of course, I'm a dad. I forget all this stuff. Kids remind me.
Tom, you look like a guy with some strange Christmas traditions. Do you have anything that would be considered unusual?
What else unusual? Nowadays, because my family, I grew up, my parents were divorced when I was like 12 or 13. So my dad would have Christmas Eve because my mom was a nurse and she'd normally work, and we'd spend Christmas with her. So we got to open presents both days. But it's now grown into a tradition because both my parents are gone. One of us hosts Christmas Eve, and we all get together Christmas Eve. And my brothers have, because we're too old to exchange presents, and there's so many of us now that it would bankrupt us. That we have, like, one year it was pajama themed. We all showed up in pajamas. This year it's charcuterie boards, so we all have to make creative charcuterie boards. So it's good. We all get that time, and also the cousins get to hang out together. So I don't know if that's not weird, but
here's a question to we got some boys around here. What do you get a dad who says that he doesn't want anything? As probably dads that don't want to sell liquor. Was that you, Josh?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, what dad's gonna say no to booze, or beer? I mean, come on, man.
Tom?
I don't know if I can beat that one beyond like a gift card or something like that, so they can decide. But men hate shopping, so maybe a gift card to a liquor store.
I think I'm still of the opinion that gift cards are kind of lame. And this is someone that's probably gonna have to get some, but it is tough to get dads something that say they don't want anything.
I always try to find those things like, things that, aren't going to be regifted. So I that's why I think booze is a big one. I think coffee, chocolate, I mean, that kind of stuff. People are like, what? They're never going to be like, oh crap, someone gave me coffee, or crap, someone gave me chocolate. I wouldn't want that. Like, hello, it's easy.
It's still hard for my wife to wrap around that some of my favorite gifts nowadays, and I must just be really old, are white t-shirts and socks.
Socks hit every time.
Because I wear a lot of suits and all. Having a white t-shirt to wear under your dress shirt is a good thing.
Yeah, I think I've reached the age now where socks are sick. Like there'd be a time when I was a kid, I was like, this is lame. I'm like,
I got a early Christmas gift. I got socks.
Please do not show your feet again. Don't do it. I'm taking you.
Star Trek.
All right, good. We didn't get the full foot. I just was still shocked that you showed your whole foot on the other one. Someone says they watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy every Christmas season.
I've never even watched it once. I know I watched the first one. I got so bored of it. I didn't want to.
Erica's not on. I feel bad doing this with Erica not on the program to defend.
Although, I mean, in terms of watching movies for Christmas tradition, I mean, obviously, like, I help my wife. We wrap all these presents, and so we have to watch. She wants to watch White Christmas every year. I like it, so we watch it.
White Christmas is fun.
And then, obviously, we got to watch Die Hard. One of probably the best Christmas movie ever, Yippee-ki-yay. But then, in terms of other Christmas movies, like with the kids, It's a Wonderful Life.
Someone brought up that they do Chinese takeout for Christmas dinner, and of course, now all I can think about is A Christmas Story. The ending scene of.
They do Chinese takeout for Christmas dinner. That's interesting. Because I read this fascinating story that amongst Chinese Americans in the United States, the number one day for them to have weddings for their kids, they plan it, is what day? Not Christmas.
New Year's?
Day.
Thanksgiving, because no one thinks they have Chinese on Thanksgiving Day. They want their turkey. So they have weddings on Thanksgiving because they're like, no one's going to want to order from our food. So the people who own Chinese restaurants, their kids always get married on Thanksgiving. That's what I heard.
Here's a weird tradition. My wife and I, we sometimes love watching Hallmark movies. Just to be able to comment all the way through it, kind of like Statler or Waldorf or something, or Mystery Science Theater, where it's like you predict what's going to happen next, and the lumberjack is going to fall in love with the big city.
And you never get it wrong because they're the easiest, most predictable movies of all time.
Right.
Well, there's that one comic. Actually, I saw this clip. He was like, he's like the nerd scientist, guy who does stand-up comedy, and he goes, here's the 10 possibilities. The guy will be a lumberjack. He'll be a owner of a store with his dad. All these things, all these inputs, and then for the girl, she'll be and where will the setting be? And he just plugs all these things into it, and he spins the wheel, and it randomly comes up, and it'll say every Hallmark movie ever. So whatever, it's just like, to me, it cracks you up. Like it's just the same formula, just change the inputs. Oh, I'm going to a small town. Oh, he owns she owns a florist shop.
Someone from the big city comes to the small city.
They never leave. It's a quaint town in Vermont.
No one can say now they don't know what to get a dad who doesn't know what, because the chat is popping off with suggestions of things to do. So if you want, what are we at? 35 minutes into the YouTube. You can go check out the chat. Thank you for all of your contributions. And hopefully, actually this year it was pretty sick. I found a vintage Gordie Howe jersey in a thrift shop in Indianapolis. And I snagged that for my father. So that's going to go up in the bar if my mom allows it. We'll see. But Mr. Hockey. Okay. Next section. We actually, so Nuns are kind of back. We had an AP video that we can watch now about this new trend, this strange new trend of women joining the religious life. And I'm happy to announce our producer has very personal experience with this. And I felt as though Tom, and Josh didn't spend any individual time in the convent, that it was probably best to bring her on to talk about it. So let's watch this video. I'll bring Rosie on and we can talk.
Stapleton, an only child who grew up loving tennis and drawing, recently joined a young community of Franciscan sisters in Ohio. She's not yet a sister, but is on her way to join the 1% of nuns in the U.S. who are under 30. Less than 200 young women enter into a religious vocation each year in the U.S., and not all will complete the almost 10-year process to become a sister. But for those who do, they are giving up many trappings of modern life, dating, material wealth, and sometimes even cell phones and fashionable clothes. In exchange, they lead an immersive religious life, often in intergenerational communities like Sister Sarum, who worked as a nurse before entering the Sisters of the Holy Family, at a time when the average age of an American nun is 80.
I enjoy sitting with them, talking with them, easing their aches and pains.
So even as the overall number of religious sisters in the U.S. declines, a small group continues to take the ultimate leap into faith.
Very, very cool. And we actually received an email on our section about altar servers being exclusively male. And funny, someone brought this up and there was some debate in the comments. She said, I've listened to Wednesday's LOOPcast, took particular interest in altar serving being reserved for boys, young men. As I've gotten older and perhaps wiser, I believe that I believe that to be the best for boys as well as our church, even though 2 of my daughters were altar servers, let me add here that girl altar server, because they are often needed as boys aren't interested in, sometimes not very into the serving, but that could be because of the effect of having girls serving. Imagine that. Yes, I feel like that's very much my thoughts. But basically the email, and thank you for sending it in, was like, okay, so we have this opportunity for men now, but we don't really have any exposure for young women to even see becoming a nun as a possibility for their lives, even just access to that vocation. And so I bring on our resident producer, Rosie, here. Rosie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
So if you could just give us a little bit of background on your experience, and I know you did some research as some possibilities to be exposed to religious life for women.
Yeah. So a background on me, I entered the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist when I was 18 years old. So right after high school, I entered the convent. I was there for around 2.5 years. So I was a postulant, I was a novice, I wore a full habit for about 1.5 years. And then I left when I was about 6 months out from making first vows. So in the process, it differs, but for my community, that was still like 5 years away from final vows. So I really loved my time with the sisters. The Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist are amazing. They're really strong community. They started in 1997. They started with 4 sisters. They have over 100 sisters now. And yeah, I just really had an incredible experience with religious life in general.
And you said it was actually surprising to you that they're saying 1% of nuns are under that certain age. The average age is 80. Yeah.
I think after I thought about it, I realized, oh, that makes sense. But the community I was with, the average age was 35. So it was strange to me. I was like, wait, there's only 1% of women religious are under the age of 30. Because we had a lot of young sisters, and I entered the community. Wow. I entered with, there were 13 young women who entered at the same time, which is also pretty unusual.
Yeah, I mean, again, Rosie's experience was quite beautiful, but statistically, it's the anomaly. Although I don't think it will be in 40 years. I think it's 40 years from now. A lot of the religious sisters will look a lot like what the Sisters of Mary are. And they won't look like the Sacramentine sisters that are in my town of Petoskey, where how many sisters do they have left? 1.
Wow.
And she's at 90 some years old. So that unfortunately is a very common experience. Like all throughout Michigan, there's several, and throughout the United States, there are these orders that are slowly dying. And that's because I feel like the silent and baby boomer generation of nuns, they embraced modernity. They got rid of the traditional habits, and they lost the charism of their founding and drifted. and they embraced the social justice stuff. And not that they didn't pray, but it was sort of not even a secondary, but more like a tertiary thing. And, that's not really attractive to young people. My generation, Generation X, the millennials, Gen Z, they didn't want any part of that. But what Rosie, I think you guys got attracted to, not that, ultimately God had a different plan for you, but you were still attracted to this new way, the Sisters of Mary, which are trying, like,
Josh, you want to ask her?
Huh?
You want to ask her?
Well, I mean, like, right? What is it about them that
we got her here
that attracted you that wouldn't have attracted? Because there's a dozen other places in Michigan, but they're all on,
Someone asked me, they were like, "Why didn't you just enter the Benedictine sisters down the road? Like, they're so much closer to home. I live in Virginia. The order I was entering was in Michigan." And my response was, "Well, why don't you just marry the closest man? He's right there."
Some people do.
Religious life.
That's how I used to ask women out in high school.
Hey, you're closest to me. Why don't you just let's do it?
No problem.
Hopefully, women.
So Rosie, but first off, what attracted you as a young woman to the religious life to even just discern that as a possibility for you?
I think there's John Paul II talks about this. He's like, young people want to do hard things, right? Young people want to be all in. They want to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. And entering religious life for me was not only a personal call from the Lord. I definitely felt called in prayer, and through my formation, my parents were really encouraging about it when I brought it up. But then also this idea of making a difference and being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. And the Sisters of Mary do wear the full habit. They are all in. They wear it all the time. We wore our habits when we were playing Frisbee, when we were doing dishes, when we were praying. And I think there's something very attractive about being yourself all the time and living that consecration consistently and visibly. I think what happened after Vatican II is seen by most religious as a real tragedy. I think some people think everybody chose that, but some sisters in some orders, you have to remember, sisters vow obedience. They vow obedience to their superiors. And so some of these sisters didn't have a choice. They would wake up and their habit was gone and a pantsuit was in its place. Like they didn't have, and the choice that they made was to live their vow of obedience. And some sisters felt called to leave the convent. Some sisters felt called like, hey, I can't be obedient to this anymore. So I think it's a very complex issue. I went to visit, when I was a postulant, I went to visit a community of sisters who was really, like you were saying, Josh, like in decline. And God does that. They're not attracting vocations anymore, and that's God's will for them. He doesn't want that religious order to be a part of the church anymore, and that's God's will. But we went to visit the memory ward of these sisters. They're probably in their 80s, 90s, having troubles with their memory. And my postulant mistress walked in wearing her full habit, and all of these sisters, they would grab us and they'd say, "Can you bring me a habit? Like I want, like, she's so pretty, the pretty one. I want to touch the pretty one." And they wanted to touch the habit and they wanted to like be near it. So I think to say that, oh, all of these nuns chose this, they were put in an impossible situation. And it was a very, very hard time. So just to speak to that a little bit, because I think it's very misunderstood what happened. But what's beautiful is the way that the traditional way of living consecrated life is on its way up. It really is so much hope. I've talked to so many young women who are discerning religious life. Being an ex-con, I think I'm very approachable. I don't have a habit, but I was
ex-con takes a different meaning here. Yeah.
Yeah, ex-convent. We wore black and white. We lived in cells, No, fun fact, the prison cell actually originates from the religious cell, not the other way around.
That is very interesting. But Rosie, really apologize to cut you off here, but in the interest of time, I grossly paraphrased this really well-written longer email from Sue Ann. Shout out Sue Ann from Arizona. But
yeah,
so
really
the question here is, But what about younger girls? Why aren't religious orders actively pursuing and exposing young ladies and girls to their vocation, especially with a decrease in religious vocations in most orders in the U.S.? I would love more ideas for young ladies and girls of our parishes. Do you think this might be a topic that could be pursued? She was asking specifically for Erica, as many people do. But Rosie, do you have any suggestions from your perspective of ways to even make this an option and expose people at the parish level at a younger age?
Yeah, so many. And I apologize in advance, Sue Ann. I am a poor replacement for Erica. So the first thing that came to mind when Tom and I were talking about this was I'm from the Arlington Diocese, and something we would do, and I assume they still do, is go on a nun run. So you get a bunch of women who are discerning, who are interested in religious life, put them in a 12-passenger van, and make a road trip to a bunch of different convents in the area. And say, hi, let's go visit these Franciscan sisters. Let's visit the Carmelites. Let's visit the Dominicans, and just go and talk to the sisters, learn about their charism. Obviously, set it up with the convents first. But the sisters love that. They love to talk to young women, and really are always looking for vocations. Inviting sisters to come and speak in your diocese or in your parish. A lot of these religious orders have speaking engagements. There are a couple books and podcasts that I can put in the chat after this. One is A Right to Be Married by Mother Mary Frances, A Right to Be Merry, about her entering of the convent. The Shepherd's Tartan by Sister Mary Jean Dorsey. The Let Love podcast is by the Sisters of Life. So if you're just curious, what are these sisters like? Listen to that podcast. The Abiding Together podcast also has a religious sister on it, Sister Miriam. So what are sisters like? Who are they? And then just, of course, obviously pray, like really pray for these young women and encourage them to talk about it, recommend it to them, like say, hey, have you ever thought about religious life? And then if you just want to know more about different orders, there's this great website. I'll put it in the chat later. It's CMSWR, so the Council of Major Superiors of Religious Orders. It lists all of the religious orders in the United States that are affiliated. My convent that I was with included. It lists all the discernment retreats available from all of these. So they want vocations. They want young women to be interested, but you just have to do a little digging. And I really encourage anyone to go and do it if you're thinking about it. Just try it. It's totally worth it.
Well, Rosie, thank you so much for sharing your experience and all you do for the podcast. You clearly do not get enough appreciation. Thank you, and appreciate everything we do. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Peace. All right. Slide into the Twilight Zone now. Josh, you're up first.
So Senator Dick Durbin was there's a meeting in the Judiciary Committee, and they were talking about NCAA athletes, and he asked the NCAA president how many athletes there are throughout all the different colleges across the country, all the different teams, and he said 510,000. That's pretty amazing, college athletics. And then he's like, how many of them are transgender athletes? And it was like something like 10. And so Dick Durbin, who's a Democrat who embraces the radical rainbow jihad trans agenda, decides to go to Twitter and scold us, not Catholic vote specifically, but anyone who believes in normalcy and is against the jihad of the LBGTs. He goes, 510,000 NCAA athletes, and there's 10 or fewer transgender. Let's focus on ways to actually improve women's sports. That was obviously his way of saying, who cares? No big deal, which, of course, is the dumbest argument I've ever heard. If it's only 10 athletes, then maybe don't blow the whole damn thing up.
Yeah, right.
Like maybe just say to those 10 athletes, we got this just fine, thank you. And we don't want to, because, of course, he makes it seem like it's so insignificant. But if you're talking about 10 athletes who are transgender, who are on volleyball teams, and how many times are they going to play different teams? That affects, and how many games do they play? It's
but you're going too much into the madness.
You're talking about thousands upon thousands of athletes that are affected. So this idea that it has no effect or very little effect, so just do what we want. Actually, if it has such a little effect, then how about we not do what you want and they just go take their ball and go home? It's just dumb.
Yeah, I don't think that's the argument that he. I think he's thinking this argument goes a different way. This is not exactly.
Let's upend everything about it for just 10 people. Like, how about we don't? Actually,
it's honestly such an outrageous suggestion, a line of argument. It's not even worth having to go parse out all the individual effects of these 10 athletes and all the other athletes. It's like, actually, we can make a pretty easy, simple solution. Like, do not let men play in women's sports.
That's what in politics we call a process argument. It's like, oh, who cares? It's just 10 athletes. It's not that big of a deal. It doesn't have that big of an impact. That's what they said about like gay marriage. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. It won't affect that many people. And then that's what they said on immigration. Oh, it's not. There's only like a couple 100,000 illegal immigrants. Who cares? And then they changed their tune. And then 10 years later, like, well, now there's so many transgender athletes, you can't say no to them now. Same thing with illegal immigrants. Well, there's 20 million illegals. You're going to deport them all now?
Yeah, right.
So they've made up their mind that they think it's something that's good, and they're going to use whatever argument it is at the time. Oh, there's not that many. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, no, there's too many. You can't change it. It's almost like they're lying. You know what I mean? It's almost like they're lying.
Gosh, it hits every time. Tom, any thoughts on that before your twats?
I think the whole LGBT XYZ agenda was based on just what Josh is saying, that they want to change the culture for a small portion instead of just leave us alone. Maybe it's not. Maybe you shouldn't be so selfish, and you want to change the definition of marriage that has been around for centuries, millennia, just to fit to make you feel good, and ultimately destroy what marriage is about.
Amen to that, brother. Tom, you got your Twilight Zone moment. What do you got?
For years, decades, there's this guy, Mikey Weinstein, and I'm not making fun of him by calling him Mikey. He goes by Mikey.
Okay.
And he believes that there is no role for religion in the U.S. Armed Forces. And he's successful every Democratic administration getting them to change certain policies, like removing crosses at Annapolis and things along those lines. More recently, at the Walter Reed Medical Center, they had created a nativity scene in the lobby of the hospital. And Mikey Weinstein, who, I mean, really has to be about 110 by now. I think he used to complain to Teddy Roosevelt about the military. The guy hates Christians. I don't think there's any other way about it. He had the baby Jesus removed from the nativity scene. Because it just to him it was proselytizing a religion. I do not know why any administration listen to this guy. I know for a fact Pete Hegseth will not be listening to Harvey Weinstein.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not
Harvey.
Mikey.
Freudian slip there. Sorry about that, Mikey.
You know who else gets pretty outraged by the sight of Jesus? Continue.
Exactly. And when this goes through the courts, I think Mikey Weinstein is like 0 for 100 when it goes through the courts. But instead of going through the courts, first the Obama administration, first the Clinton administration, then the Obama administration, now the Biden administration, they get a phone call from Mikey Weinstein and pull.
Well, it's just the excuse they need.
Right.
It's what they want, and now they're given a fig leaf of an argument. And even if this guy loses in court all the time, he's doing these cases. He's doing it to generate news, to try to get the word out and convince everyone else in the country, the separation of church and state, all this kind of stuff, which it went so bananas where like a high school coach couldn't even do a prayer after the game.
Yeah. The process is the punishment,
Yeah. Well, and not just that, but like, even if they lose in court, you're trying to win over you're trying to win people over to your cause and convince everyone. So we have, the vast majority of Americans who think, certain things that are totally constitutionally allowable are against the separation of church and state. We have to vacuum seal everything that's religious away from public life. It's a joke.
And they intimidate both schools and cities and towns and things like that. And that's why groups like Alliance Defending Freedom, Liberty Counsel, all these groups that pro bono will take up these cases are just such a godsend.
Yeah.
Beckett Fund.
Yeah, it is pretty ridiculous. I saw you had a second one, Tom, or you want to roll?
We can roll.
We can roll. It basically, I see it here. It's Notre Dame is playing IU. And as a recent Hoosier, I'm very excited to see I think like it was like God knew this needed to happen. Like 2 Indiana teams needed to play each other in the college football playoff. And I'm torn because I'm Catholic, but I also like a good underdog story. So
What does
that was
that
my
have to do
watch.
with these 2 secular schools in Indiana fighting against each other?
Well, apparently one's going to mass. Marcus Freeman is a Catholic head coach. He's getting a lot of kids to go to mass. I actually am a big Marcus
You
Freeman
restarted
guy.
that tradition, and I would almost want the team to succeed just because of that.
Yeah. Although we have some inner office rivalries here because we have some Domer. Well, we have a Domer. Actually, a couple think Catholic vote. And we have IU people as well. So it should be fun. But
I know one of the gifts my wife is giving me for Christmas. It's back in the 1920s when the Ku Klux Klan was very big in Indiana, more than you'd think.
Oh
But there
yeah.
weren't a lot of black people in Indiana, so they went after Catholics, and they were holding in South Bend and around Notre Dame. They were going to hold a couple of rallies, and instead, a bunch of the college kids, with the wink, wink, nudge, nudge approval of the priest, the dean, fought. The college kids fought against the Ku Klux Klan and stopped
The rally.
them gathering using things like throwing potatoes, if you want to go into
oh
stereotypes.
yeah, dude.
But that's what they did, throwing potatoes at the Klan to stop them.
Heck yes, dude.
That's why they're the Fighting Irish.
That is perfect. Just pelting them with potatoes. We got to look into that story. We might need to put up that story on the Twitter. That's hilarious.
There's a book I'm getting for Christmas, so I can share it with everybody after.
There you go.
Too good to look up.
That was quite a twist. I did not see that one coming. This is why I love this podcast. So, Tom, I'm also glad to have you here for my Twilight Zone. So, again, I'm just like everyone else. I'm a normal, 26-year-old dude scrolling Twitter. And, Twitter is interesting because it reveals people that have very soft skin. Because, when they start fighting people with small accounts or anonymous accounts and you just see a very public figure fighting someone, it almost never makes them look good. And so usually this takes place with different celebrities or whatever. We've now gotten it to come to Congress, I guess, the last couple of days. I can't even read out loud the response of Dan Crenshaw to, let me check some notes, the account Cat Turd. So Dan Crenshaw, sitting congressman, is fighting an account named Cat Turd on Twitter. And at no point sat back and was like, I'm really out here fighting an account named Cat Turd, as you can see on Twitter. It has 3.3 million views. I'm not familiar. I think the guy behind it must be known. But there's a couple problems with this.
Very well known, right?
Couple problems with this to me. One, you're in Congress. I understand that the new decorum in Congress is basically just attention whoring and trying to fake fight people. I miss the days where they actually used to fight people. Like I'd actually be kind of in favor of bringing back duels to an extent because at least it's not as embarrassing. It's like, man up here. I mean, seriously, the amount of profanity in this tweet is just unbelievable. I can't even read it. But Dan Crenshaw is just starting to strike me as a guy, and some of you may know people like this. Every time he gets criticized a little bit, and I know he wears the eye patch or whatever, he brings up his military service too much. Like I don't know if you guys can relate on this, but whenever anyone, if they're angry or they get checked on something like, well, I fought, I was a Navy SEAL, I did this, I killed people, I this or that. It's like most of the real soldiers that I know, and I have some in my family, they never speak about warfare. Ever. I mean, and I don't know if like podcasting the internet has changed this. Maybe more people do it, but really just rubbing me the wrong way here. Like I really appreciate when people serve the country honorably, and I have a lot of respect for that. But when it's kind of used as an attention cudgel, it rubs me really the wrong way. So Dan Crenshaw.
Well, I hate it when it's like that makes you impervious to any criticism or attack. Like, no, that's not how that goes. Like we respect your service, but that doesn't mean everything that comes out of your mouth is, the gospel truth. Sorry.
Yeah. So my other one that I have is just like, all right, so like chill out on Twitter. Nancy Mason, Dan Crenshaw, please serve the country. So Hunter Biden, Hunter Biden back on my radar. I think they're torturing him is what I'm coming to. They had a Christmas party at the White House. Tom, were you at this Christmas party?
No, I can't say I was.
Dang. But the Bidens were there.
Maybe next Christmas.
Okay, maybe you can invite to the next Christmas party. So we get all these pictures with Hunter Biden with prominent influencers on Twitter, and they're all saying he's a nice guy. And I mean, I think the biggest punishment here is that he has to spend time with these DC influencers. I think they're torturing him.
I guess it still beats jail, though. I mean,
true, it does beat jail time and the pardon and all that, but this guy on this is so hyper online. But there's this like, I think he's homosexual. I'm not positive. He goes around and he does like awkward singing performances in front of people. And I mean, this one just.
What was your first clue?
Oh yeah, exactly. Here we go.
Say where you are, and say it like you mean with your physical words.
Man, dude. Ooh.
Yeah, I would actually hug him too, because that's probably the quickest way to get him to shut up.
Look at his face here. Just they're torturing Hunter. They're punishing him for embarrassing the family. I mean, that's my only explanation here. Yeah.
Hunter's thinking right there, where's the cocaine I stashed in this White House?
Oh my god.
They never found out who stashed that cocaine.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
No idea. Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know. The investigation.
I don't know.
We weren't able to find out.
No idea.
Who put the cocaine there. And you know what the best part about this whole story is to me? I bet that they're probably getting paid. All those people for sure got paid during the Kamala campaign.
Dude.
But they got a paycheck and they're like, hey, post picture with Hunter Biden, say he's a nice guy, and we're going to throw you a check. And like clapping seals, Hunter Biden's actually a good guy now after getting his whole family addicted to crack and sleeping with his brother's widow and selling government influence. And it's embarrassing all around. That's all I got to say.
I mean, it's almost like they're, these influencers are almost like they're prostitutes, which is something that Hunter Biden also knows about.
Yeah, I hate to say it. People were saying. I wasn't saying. People were saying.
I think there's video there too. I don't know.
Yeah, and it's not like there's a whole laptop full of videos of all of this in which he self-recorded. Oh my gosh. Gross all around. Sorry to end on that little gross note.
I am looking forward to turning the chapter on this abysmal presidential administration.
Amen to that, brother. I have good news. We have another draft episode. This time it is on Christmas music. And we've already pre-recorded it. It was contentious. I'm not going to reveal anything about the results. Let's just say haymakers were thrown.
It was a clash.
It was a clash. And so that is coming on Monday because we are going to be out on Monday. We're going to have a pre-recorded episode. The ultimate Christmas music draft. We hit all the categories. We talked all the songs. It's going to be a good time. So that'll be there Monday for you guys. Wednesday, we're going to be off. Friday, we are going to be back. And
honestly, the best category for that was worst. All three of us brought our A game on the worst one. So that's going to be fun to see. We'll see.
That's facts. Best, worst.
It was Erica, not myself.
It was not Tom.
So the audience should look forward to it.
Tom, you're a music guy. I feel like I could see you belting out some carols with the boys.
You rendered him speechless.
You're the best dressed for caroling out of the three of us right now. And Andrew,
I
nice
like
right
being
now.
festive. I have different Christmas ties for each day and Epiphany ties, but
Tom,
you don't want to hear me sing.
This is not an insult in the slightest. You look like the type of guy that dresses up as Santa for like the nieces and nephews. Is this true?
It's a very quick story. For my niece who was born 25 weeks premature, so her first Christmas was spent in the hospital. So the next Christmas, I went up to visit, and for her older brother in his class, I dressed up as Santa. And I even have pictures of it if you're on Facebook or whatever. And at one point, my sister came with my niece, and my niece, who's just about a year by then, starts reaching out towards me. So I grab her, and I could hear my nephew at the time, who was like 3 or 4, say, "That really must be Santa. Molly doesn't like anybody." So yes, I have dressed up for the nieces.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Sweet. Well, hey, we appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a Merry Christmas. If you want to help out the show, LOOPcast@catholicvote.org is where you can join the Champions Club. It's the best way to support us. We appreciate everyone who is a champion supports us. You can leave us reviews. Apple Podcasts and Spotify is where you can do that. You can subscribe here on YouTube. Leave a like. all the good stuff. We appreciate you very much. Hope you have a Merry Christmas. Hope you really enjoy it. Spend some time with family. But pray for us. We're praying for you. St. Thomas More, St. Fidelis, Our Lady of Guadalupe. Pray for us. And we'll see you guys